Hello everyone. Today is the second press conference. We did press conference last 2 weeks ago, and today we will have also another press conference. And please follow with me and let's see what is in there.
People who have fled from Ukraine. On one hand, Ukrainian citizens who are automatically entitled to residence, access to work and study permits due to their inclusion in the paragraph 24 Residence Act. And on the other hand, a very large number of so-called third country nationals who fled the exact same war but can only receive limited protection status through Section 24 and are currently only allowed to legally stay in Germany until the 31st of August. Third country nationals from Ukraine are mainly by POC. This includes also stateless people as well, and have already disproportionately been affected by discrimination and disadvantage. We are now witnessing a situation in which many are systematically excluded from the labor market, state support, and society. Today we have brought together 5 experts from our civil network to speak about the legal, political, and social landscape here in Berlin and to provide their personal perspectives as individuals affected by the discriminatory implementation of the current migration policy. Today's panel consists of Alexander Gorski, a lawyer specializing in migration law, Evan Grieve from Migrationsrat, captain from International Women's Space and a student who is studying in Ukraine, Collins, from the Student Coalition in BIPOC Ukraine, and who was also studying in Ukraine, and Christy from BIPOC Ukraine, who studied and lived in Ukraine for over 10 years. Before we begin with the panelists, I have a few organizational points. As you may have guessed at this point, the event will be held in English, and an interpreter for English and German will be available to translate your questions. From our group of 5 panelists, we will have 3 speakers. The first speaker will be Edwin from Migrationsrat, who will comment upon the general situation here in Berlin and in Germany from an organizational perspective. The second is Captain, a final year medical student who is studying in Ukraine, and then Christian Collins. After the speakers are finished, we will open up to some questions from our guests here. Yes, so Ed, if you'd like to begin.
Thank you. So my name is Ed. I'm here for Migrationsrat Berlin, which is an umbrella organization of over 80 migrant and diasporic self-organized organizations and groups in Berlin. Contrary to the main perspective, of course, migrant organizations have been active in supporting refugees coming from Ukraine from the very beginning, and have made countless efforts to provide support in all the mentioned aspects and areas. However, we have been, and this is from an organizational perspective, just something that I would like to bring in first. Of course, not been supported neither through resources nor through transparent informational policies through the Senate. And this is something that we can't stress enough, especially since the newly elected government tries to, or kind of declared to have a more participatory approach to politics, and especially in this field we have seen countless problems where this didn't work, and where especially the affected people themselves and of course all the supporting structures had to provide lots of effort to get infos on the most basic processes on, be it registration, be it how to get money and basic social benefits, etc. And this is something that the Senate is definitely responsible for. Speaking of transparency, we have been trying to get in contact with all kinds, all relevant and responsible actors in the Senate. However, we need to specifically address the Innenverwaltung, meaning the Senate for Interior in Berlin, who has been blocking out almost all communication and attempts of contact. However, we know that especially the Innenverwaltung is part of the problem why we have been waiting for decisions for such a long time. Who doesn't know this, that Innen is also the responsible party for the Landesamt für Einwanderung, the LEA, and so we have a, I don't know how you say that in English, a very difficult time to address the responsible actors and to neither get our information heard, but also, of course, see a direct impact of, because it's one thing to be heard and it's another thing to actually have the things that you demand also implemented. Speaking of demands, we have experienced a lot, a very huge, as it always is with these federal decisions. Of course, we have the Zuständigkeitsstreit, the argument of who is responsible, be it the federal government or be it the Berlin city government. We unfortunately have to state that especially third country national refugees have been kind of hereby play ball in this political fights between who is responsible to make the decisions. We all know that it's the Innenministerium that is responsible for not granting permits under Section 24. However, we strongly believe that the Berlin government does have options as well, on one hand to push for a federal solution, but to also provide solutions on the local level.
Thank you. And today we speak on behalf of a group of students, doctors, mechanics, engineers, hairdressers, lawyers, businessmen and women, and the list goes on. We are from Morocco, Zambia, Algeria, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, India. This list also goes on and on. We're refugees fleeing the war in Ukraine. We have left behind our lives, our belongings, our dreams, our plans, and increasingly it seems our dignity. Our stories are both unique, as all human stories are, and they have inevitable commonalities because we all intersect somewhere. Our fates are tied together because the German government chose not to see everyone fleeing Ukraine as equal, as diverse but equal refugees, but rather chose to create divisive, discriminated groupings. one group with all the benefits and the other having deadlines and other indignities imposed on them. A group of people who, even though Germany has labor shortages and the Federal Employment Agency has stated that they need to attract 400,000 new workers every year, are told they need to leave. Rather than see us as a solution, we are told by the August 31st deadline imposed by the government that no matter your qualifications, no matter your work ethic, no matter your contribution to our workforce, no matter your benefits to our society and economy, no matter, we'd rather be racist and discriminatory and expel you. The author, Ocean Vuong, puts it aptly. Sometimes you're erased before being given a chance to state who you are. We are country nationals, but that is the legal umbrella that we've been placed under and had the discrimination targeted at. So that's who we speak on behalf of today. That country nationals fleeing the war in Ukraine. Thank you.
Just start. So my name is Christy, and I am an environmental engineer, a model, an artist from Ukraine. And having lived in Ukraine for over 10 years, I built a thriving career in midst of loving family and friends. I was forced to leave Kyiv on the 27th of February. And I was headed to safety in those times. It took me a week in Poland to recover from the shock of the constant noise and sirens. And getting to Germany the first day and going to the LAF office, someone told me, "This is only for Ukrainians." And I asked, "How do you know I am not from Ukraine?" And he took his time and was like, "Show me your documents." And I was like, "I will not." But that first encounter made me understand, like, I might have to fight. And this would just be a chronicle of several stories of people that have to go through this every day. First, the discriminatory laws of offices and institutions such as the job center and social district. When we go there just to get basic things, were appalling, especially for the first month for people who came from Ukraine. And this also just, even till now, for people who lost their documents, they don't get anything. So they're just leaving on a maybe. Ahmed from Iran is a permanent resident holder from Ukraine. And the BAMF would prefer to expel him from learning Dutch with an already stated law or rules that people coming from Ukraine have access to the Dutch integration course. And he has to fight with the BAMF office for this to be implemented in his case. Damilola, with her son, being pushed back to Ukraine to get a document, even though she had the birth certificate of him being given birth to in Ukraine. She had to go back to Kyiv during the war to get a document to come back to be registered in Germany. And this happens also with requested documents where we have to go back and forth between institutions telling you, go here to get a document, and then you come back and they're like, oh, that's not the document. Go back to get the same document, and sometimes you have to submit the same document several times. And this brings a mental toll on people after a certain period of time. Having to do this for 6 months, it's violent. And this is the situation a lot of people are going through. I would like to say, in my case, I have my paragraph 24. But in the period of time it took me coming from the first day, so I was one of the first sets of people to come here, and to June 19th, when I got to my paragraph 24, it was a toll. I've had people come to me saying, sometimes I just want to curl up in a ball and just cry. But I would come up here and just put a strong face, because then I need the paragraph 24 to continue. I'll just finish with this. This is by Michelle Bershman, a former United States representative. He says, what I'm talking about is the order of deportation, the sequence of deportation. It is impossible to move 11 million illegal immigrants. Of course, we're not. Overnight, you do it in steps. And that is what the German government is doing right now. They're doing it in steps to push you over the border. And deportation is violent. Having to be indecisive concerning people's fate is violent. This shouldn't have to happen again, because we've seen waves of this happening where people have to fight for basic rights. And that's what
My name is Collins. From what she said, you'd be able to understand that even as someone who already has Section 24, it was really, really difficult. And she's just one out of the many who hasn't had anything yet. So if you can understand how difficult it is for a person who has gotten hers, then think of the really many others who haven't even known what it looks like, right? And I would like to add that to every person here, you should remember that these are stories, right? But these are not just stories. This is not fiction. And it might look like horror, but it's not a horror story. It's real life. These are human lives, right? And the fact that we bring to life traumas and horrors with every living breath, and like all for what? Because we don't have a Ukrainian passport, is appalling. I represent the Student Coalition for Equal Rights, and I've got Ukrainian friends in Germany. And throughout the whole time we've been in Germany, we have been always from one project to another, from one step to another, not forgetting the fact that we constantly live with this anxiety of what has happened before and what is going to happen in the future. So that you have this endless loop of back and forth, fighting with your past and your future, and you're still trying to keep your present sane. So I feel this conference was really necessary to get out these really huge problems. And I hope we will be able to get it out in the most appropriate and most audible way possible.
Hello, I'm Ulrike Weiner from ND, the newspaper, and thank you for sharing your stories. I actually have some legal questions. I think I can also ask them, right? First of all, could you maybe explain again, because I find it very hard to explain what a Fiktionsbescheinigung is. Also, I heard that third country nationals didn't get the real Fiktionsbescheinigung, but a different one. Can you maybe also explain that? And also, I think Christy mentioned the paragraph 25. No, Ed mentioned it, I think. Can you also explain that? what it means, this paragraph 25. And also I would like to know what you think now will happen if on 31st of August people have no legal right to stay. What are you expecting will happen? Thank you.
Yes, now. Okay, the thing with the... Can I take them? The thing with the Fiktionsbescheinigung, it's something really weird and something really technical. If you want to read up on it, it's paragraph 81 of the Residence Act, and it basically says, when you're in Germany legally and you apply for a residence title, your stay is legal until you have a decision by the authority. Okay, because the migration offices normally take sometimes months to decide on a residence title, and then maybe your old residence is already expired. So in the meantime, you get what's called a Fiktionsbescheinigung, so your stay is fictionalized legal. So the thing is, normally you get like one of those small green papers that look like the old German driving licenses. That didn't happen for people fleeing Ukraine, especially for third country nationals. That didn't happen, and it did not happen intentionally, which caused a lot of problems in everyday life, because they just had the PDF confirmation that they asked for temporary protections, but the social welfare office, job center, and other authorities were always asking for the Fiktionsbescheinigung, and it wasn't even intended to give them one. Okay, so maybe one more thing on the Fiktionsbescheinigung. This would also be an option to keep people in Germany. This is something Berlin could do. The migration office in Berlin, the Landesamt für Einwanderung, if they get a directive to just hand out Fiktionsbescheinigungen to third country nationals, this is something they could do without a problem, without the federal government. What you mentioned, right? There's solutions here in Berlin, and this would be an option to say, okay, those people get this for 1 year, and throughout this year they have the possibility to make stuff happen that would fulfill the requirements for other kind of visas that they then could apply for. So that's why Fiktionsbescheinigung is very technical, but in this sense very important. Then about Section 25 of the Residence Act, Section 25 of the Residence Act basically has all the humanitarian visas. So if you're recognized as a refugee or recognized that you have a prohibition of deportation or subsidiary protection, that's where you fall under. But maybe you could explain a little on the political proposal. Absatz 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absatz 4.
Okay, but maybe you can explain the political proposal. But as we know, this is not going to happen. So what I think, specifically for Berlin, what we have to see is what this working group comes up. Like different ministries have set up a working group in April. They took a very long time to come to a decision because some... Yes, in Berlin. So the interior, science, integration, and one more, and justice department build up a working group where all the parties of the coalition are represented, and they try to work out something which will be published next Tuesday. So I think in Berlin we have to see what happens next Tuesday, but we have to bear in mind that there are solutions, and if they don't find the solution, then it's because they don't want to, and then that's violence.
Thank you. Before explaining the idea behind 25, I think it makes sense to add that this solution of handing out Fiktionsbescheinigungen has a political argument against it, and we are very much hoping that the Senate will now push for the solution anyways, but we know that the argument against it was always a financial one. So especially the conservative part of SPD government, interior and finance Senate, which is led by the Green Party, have always been worrying that if they hand out Fiktionsbescheinigungen and then the people get rejected, the permanent job center will demand the money back. And then the city of Berlin might have to pay for handing out social benefits to people that haven't been entitled to it. And this is why this didn't happen yet. Like, this is the fear that they're having. This is what we have been hearing from parliamentarians and from people who are working in the government and who we trust. So yeah, we of course very much hope that they will push now for the Fiktionsbescheinigung anyways and take the financial risk and or find also a federal solution, because if every Bundesland now hands out Fiktionsbescheinigungen, the federal government will have to find a different solution, because it's obvious that no one can pay back social benefits for buttons. So yeah, and that makes them fall under the group of people that could receive documents also under 25 Absatz 4. So that's just another option that the city of Berlin would have had.
Okay, they'll ask in German, but I will translate.
Hi, Elias Anser von der Platz. Ich habe eine Frage zu den Herkunft.
Okay, so this is Elias Anser of Taz, and this is a question about countries of origin. Right, so first, paragraph 24 is applies technically to third country nationals who cannot safely return to their country of origin. I'll translate it by bit. So this is also a question about numbers, like how is this measured, how is this applied, how many people are we talking about when you talk about third country nationals who cannot safely go back to their countries of origin? That's the question for now.
Any numbers on how many people that affects, but this is also due to the fact that we barely have any numbers and statistics on how many third country nationals have been fleeing Ukraine and how many have arrived in Germany and how many have arrived in Berlin, which is due to the fact that registration is a very yet to this point risky decision for people to even make. So a lot of people never registered anywhere, so there are no statistics, and also the legal advice places, of course, are trying to put up statistics, but we don't really have anything that's representative. The only number that you could use to kind of make your own calculation is that the IOM reported that this number is from May though. Maybe they released a new statistic already, but in May they said that 250,000 third country nationals have left Ukraine. But what is important to note is that the decision that people can't return safely to their country of nationality is, this is not something that is embedded in Section 24. This is a decision from the Interior Minister. So Section 24 just says that everyone who is who falls under the group of people that is defined by the European Interior Ministers for the Massenzustrom-Richtlinie. And that Richtlinie says people who are expelled through war through war. That can basically be anyone. So that's why, especially in the beginning, of course, people pushed the Innenministerin to widen the group of people and to say Herkunft, this construct, this idea of Herkunft, of origin, doesn't equal nationality. So you can have a different citizenship than your origin. So of course, when people come from Ukraine and they literally have a life in Ukraine, the country of origin should be Ukraine and not the country of your passport. But that's in the law itself, and they could have interpreted it different.
Everything of that, and maybe just to add, so the problem that we are talking about is basically third country nationals with a temporary residence in Ukraine. Because people who had refugee protection in Ukraine or people who had a permanent residence in Ukraine fall under Section 24. But that, of course, is the minority of third country nationals fleeing. So the group that we're talking about today is people who had a temporary residence because they were working or studying in Ukraine. And for them, the rule is basically that if they cannot safely and permanently return to their country of origin, then they should be allowed into this. But how this works in practice is that it is checked whether a prohibition of deportation, which is a regular thing in the Migration Act, would apply. And the threshold for this is very high. So the threshold would be if you have a chronic disease and you don't have access to the healthcare system in your home country, or there is no adequate healthcare system and you would be endangered of death. That's one. Or if you would be tortured or fear starvation. But then the problem is that the migration offices can also, in terms of if there's an element of persecution or if there's an element of fear for other reasons, for sexual orientation, etc., they can also refer you to the asylum procedure and tell you to ask for asylum. And this is what basically is happening in those cases that I'm representing. Also about numbers, I think it's incredible that there are no numbers, and I think it's also an effort to not have numbers by this point, because it's I have numbers, how many people I have consulted. I have the numbers, I can tell you right now how many people I have consulted. I don't know why the government with a lot more resources can not do this. And it would be very relevant to have those numbers. We asked for those numbers, you have asked for those numbers. There are no numbers.
109,000 people have arrived through the ports of entry in Berlin. That's as of the 2nd of August. So that's at Hauptbahnhof, at Zopp, and at Südkreuz. These are where they're counting. But these are the numbers of people who have arrived through Berlin. Whether or not they stayed, we don't know that, but they came to our ports of entry here.
Okay, so this is the same question as before, but in a more personal framing. And to ask a question that might sound really naive, to the people here who are present, what is it, why can't you return to your countries of origin? And as colleagues said, if they were in a situation of war, they would want to go back to their home country, which in their case is Germany, even if they were studying somewhere else. So what is why can't you go back?
The first best reply I would have is, if I could, I would. If I could be in my country right now, I would have been, right? If I could have been in my country, I wouldn't have left in the first place, right? And I feel that's the same thing for everybody here. If you have where you would call your home, in the sense of all sorts of comfortability, you would be there, you wouldn't leave, right? So I feel asking people why they can't return to their countries really doesn't make much sense to me, because if they could be in their countries, they would have been. They wouldn't have left in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Collins. There would be other reasons I would say I could give, and there's some people that have also had like physical harm that has happened, like people from the northern part of Nigeria, for instance, leaving, and people that went through hardship in the country also leaving. So now it's more like you're sending them back to go visit and stay in place where we have like terrorist attacks, such as Boko Haram and the rest. And some other people can be like, why can't you go to stay in another part of Nigeria, for instance? Those other parts are not considered home, as he said. And if they left at some point in time, meant that they were headed to either safety or for school reasons. And if there's a better opportunity here, they came here because they felt Germany would accept us. That was it. And that's why they're here. Thank you.
I'm Renate Well. I'm part of the organizer from the founding members of BIPOC Ukraine and France and Germany. And so the one thing that really struck me about your question is that you said go home, and that is something which I am born in Berlin and I lived here for a very long time, and I speak perfectly German, and I just grew up here, I went to school, but a lot of persons don't situate me in Berlin and tell me to go home. And seriously, I do not know where to go. And I think that one of the critical conceptions of these nations and home is actually to base this on color first, but also to base this on the nationality. Not everyone that is living in Germany and is born here and maybe is also in second or third generation living in Germany has a German nationality for different reasons, but this does not mean that we are not home, and this is something which I think is very important for the inner minister, for the German policies and for German politics and for the German society to understand that home does not mean nationality. Soll ich das nochmal auf Deutsch sagen?
My question got back into my mind. I wanted to ask you again, because you said the Fiktionsbescheinigung wasn't handed out in the beginning to all of them, and because I didn't really understand it, does it also apply to Ukrainian citizens? And then maybe can you, because you said you have numbers, maybe you can tell how many people you are counseling at the moment? So.
With Ukrainian nationals, mostly it went so fast that it wasn't necessary or even possible in the time, because they just got their first appointment and they got Section 24 stamped into their passport. So there wasn't even an appointment where they could have been given this. There were cases where they were given Fiktionsbescheinigung, and these were cases of Ukrainian nationals where something was unclear. I also want to say I also represent Ukrainian nationals who have problems with the German authorities, but it's a smaller number. I also represent people from Russia who have problems with German. So this war has had its toll on the German migration system. In terms of Ukrainians, normally there wasn't the need. And all the complicated stuff coming up in relation to Section 24 was connected mostly to third country nationals. Okay, is this enough? Okay. Where I had close to 200 individual consultations, and then I had like Zoom meetings with I don't know how many people. And in the personal contact, I represent about 30 to 40 third country nationals, I would say, on different matters. By the way, also on criminal procedure, because they had there were crazy cases where they were accused of falsifying their documents, etc., etc. So not only migration cases. And in the consultation, it's I think close to 200, and then Zoom meetings with people from smaller cities where they don't have access to legal counseling. Here, and I think this is something that has been very underreported, and you speak about failure of institutions. One institution that is failing third country nationals horribly is the Ukrainian embassy. And I would ask all journalists to ask for interviews and annoy the Ukrainian embassy as much as they annoy me and my clients. The Ukrainian embassy is a disaster in helping their own citizens, who are citizens that were born to parents from African countries. And this has been underreported, but right now in a lot of cases where I represent families, where the youngest family member who was born in Ukraine might have the right to Ukrainian citizenship, even ask for it, the Ukrainian embassy is denying any kind of help. And then the solution, as we heard before, that the migration office sometimes and the Ukrainian embassy tells them to go back to Ukraine and get your stuff, if you're a Ukrainian citizen, prove it. So I think this is something that the press should be aware of and that should be reported and investigated.
Going to be closing out. We wanted to thank you all for coming today, and thank specifically our panelists and the students and individuals who spoke from their personal experience. They're in the middle of a very difficult situation with a lot of legal and social uncertainty and clarity of what the future looks like, and we are really imploring you to make it very clear and very loud that that cannot continue, that people deserve to plan for their future, to make choices, and to have the opportunities that are available to other people who also fled the war in Ukraine. As a bit of a call to action, right now most of the support for BIPOC people, for third country nationals, is coming all from community organizations and collectives. I would highly encourage that you reach out to these organizations and collectives to speak with them, to support them. Right now they are doing everything from paying hundreds of thousands of euros for accommodations that people are not having the Kostenübernahme taken by the social offices yet, to feeding people, to providing mental and physical support, and navigating their arrival here in Germany. And they could use yours in the public support. The second point that I want to draw attention to is that yesterday a petition was launched by the same organizations that organized this press conference. It is behind us. It's on init/refugee equality. It's directed towards the Innenministerin. And we encourage you to look at it, to share it, to seek our demands that are on the page. We have a very short window of time, and any publicity or opportunities you have to share that would be much appreciated. Thank you for your time.
Okay, now?
Yes, yes. Please, your name?
My name is Alexander Gorski.
And also tell me, please, because you talk about, other nationals, not only African national, but Russian national and others. How do you see, is it discrimination or racism?
So I'm a migration lawyer based in Berlin, and over the last months I have counseled hundreds and represented dozens of people fleeing the war in Ukraine. I think they have faced a lot of different obstacles than Ukrainian nationals. I think there's a different treatment by the European Union and the German government based on nationality and based of origin. So I think we can see both racism and discrimination in the response by as well as the European Union and the German government.
Thank you very much.
The same issues that we were advocating for, the same issues that we have been fighting for in relation to issues of discrimination and equal treatment of refugees, like having more better refugees than others, is the same thing that we are seeing right now, where we have the BIPOC refugees from Ukraine being given a very different treatment in regards to comparison with other refugees from Ukraine. So I would say these are the same struggles, and the fight is on. The struggles are real. The struggles is something that we have to continue fighting so that we have these issues addressed holistically, considering all refugees to be equal, regardless of where they come from, regardless of the situations under which they have fled from their countries of origin.
Your association?
I am Lucy, and I'm from International Women's Base, and also a member of the Break Isolation Group, which is a refugee women only self-organized group in International Women's Base.
And our sister here. So can you give me the link between this wave now and the wave 10 years ago?
I see something similar here, because I feel that our refugees' lives are not valued because they are coming from mainly from the global south. In comparison, if you even think about Syria, it was the majority of the people who came were well educated and lawyers and engineers, and you compare that with the situation now, I felt even then they were given somewhat of a preferential or better treatment, and at that time Angela Merkel had said, we can do it. So why isn't anybody saying we can do it now? Is it because they're mainly from African countries, from Nigeria, from Pakistan, from India, from Morocco? what is the issue? Why isn't anybody saying we can do it now? So it's a continuation of the old problem. Yeah, when there was a wave of refugees from 2012 from the Mediterranean, coming through the Mediterranean or coming through the Atlantic. It's just, it's just so hard for them. They are just stuck within this whole bureaucratic system for decades, for years, for, in a system where they just get dul-dul, and then they're supposed to cooperate for their own deportation. So yes, I'm very curious to see what happens after August 31st.
And I see you all the time at Oranienplatz, be visible there every day. How do you feel?
Yeah, I feel really good because I came to Berlin because of Oranienplatz in end of 2013. So it's actually, I found Berlin because of Oranienplatz. If it wasn't for Oranienplatz, I don't think I would have continued to come to Berlin, but I was very touched to see the unity, to see people coming together and fighting for their rights, and also looking at the historical past, this slogan that we are here because you were there and you are there. So people had an understanding of coloniality and colonial past. Also, for me, that was really important. And people talked about racialization and, racism towards refugees. So all of this drew me to, some of the ideology drew me to Oranienplatz.
But what is Oranienplatz? Our sister Fasila said Oranienplatz. Can you try to explain, because nobody know what is Oranienplatz? Can you explain Oranienplatz? Okay, back to you, Fasila. What is Oranienplatz?
For me, it's changed, isn't it, over years? The meaning. First, it was just a site where people camped and had demands. But over the years, I've seen so many groups there. Either they begin their demonstrations there, they end their demonstrations there, and now we're having the 10-year anniversary, and it's connected to the present struggles. So for me, it is mainly a site of resistance. It's not a park, it's not a square, it's not a historical site where people camped out in 2012 and the police evicted. No, it's an ongoing movement. Oranienplatz is a platform for different types of struggles, not only refugee struggles, but anti-colonial, anti-racist struggles, I would say.
I would just add on what she has said. I would say it sounds like a physical place, but this is a place that is so phenomenal and very unique when it comes to the struggles that go along with a failed state in terms of how they implement the refugee issues and issues of humanitarian protection issues. And therefore, this place for me, as she said, it's more of connecting different people who have different struggles with different on different topics, coming to this place to be able to make their demands known, be able to create a space whereby they can be able to come together and connect their struggles from different parts of the country, different parts of the world. So it's not just a physical place as it is.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So now we have reached Oranienplatz, and I just want to show you all this, artwork here, advocating for what is going on, and leave the question for you to interpret by yourself. So, as the friends, sisters said, Fasila and Lucy also said Oranienplatz. What is Oranienplatz? Oranienplatz is the place where the refugees came in 2012 and occupy because of the problems that they are passing through. And now it become waves, This is where they fight. And what we have right now with the Ukrainian refugees or the people who flee Ukrainian war, it become the waves for us, you know. We had the wave in 2013, as I told you before, with the Lampedusa or Italian refugees, and then the wave of 2015 with the, you know, with the, what do you call, yeah, Syrian refugees. And then last year, 2021, we have the issue of what was going on in Afghanistan and still what is going on in Afghanistan. And now, 2022, it is the wave of Ukrainian refugees or people who flee Ukrainian. They don't have equal rights, so that's why we are advocating here at Orani Plus equal right, or all refugees are equal. That means equal right to all. So this is Orani Plus, the place of refugees again, who fought, and now you can see Hamis is here giving the platform where everyone can come and we think together what can we do, because if Orani Plat in 2020 grant, or the government grant all these, you know, right, the refugees in 2015 would have not have problem. The refugees now, Ukrainian war, it should not have a problem, but due to the government who don't want to do it, that's why we are still at Orani Plus. We say generation, the waves, and we always can be visible and let our voices be heard. So thank you for now. Stay tuned and see what next is coming on, and please again be one of the person who contribute or be part of the movement. Thank you very much.